Jack, a 32-year-old resident of Helsinki, was a person who loved to shout out to herself. He was always attracted by the wild nature of Finland, the endless snow-covered forests, the cold lakes and the sense of freedom that this space gave. One winter, when the temperature dropped to -15 degrees Celsius, and the weather forecast called for snowfall, we decided to go on a solo hike in the forested areas near Lapland. This will be a perfect weekend, he thought as he packed his backpack. He had a sleeping bag, a gas sleeping bag, pieces of dried urchin for 2 days, fresh cheese, warm clothes and a compass. I found the phone, but didn't think about the spare battery. Is it possible that you've done something wrong in 2 days? Merkavav Vin. Day 1. The hike began in the distance. Jack made it to the forest by bus, and then buried his pawns in the huts, where the snow lay like a thick keel, and the yalans bent under the load of white hats. The silence was as magical as the crispness of the snow underfoot and the gentle breeze of the wind. A few kilometers have passed, experiencing frosty winds, and having broken up a selection of small gallivans. Having ignited the stove, Jack brewed hot tea and mixed some dried meat with bread. It's better to sit at home, he grinned, marveling at how the sun was completely sitting down, filling the sky in a rye-colored shade. And then the first alarming signs made themselves known. The phone you are using can take a few photos, showing at least 20% charge. It's okay, I'll be back tomorrow, Jack calmed himself, not showing any respect for those whose signal was weak. He climbed into his sleeping bag and fell asleep to the sounds of the wind, humming at the tops of the trees. Another day. Waking up in the afternoon, Jack realized that something was wrong. The wind became heavy, and the sky was filled with gray gloom. Suddenly trouble began. The snow was falling so thickly that visibility was reduced to just a few meters. Jack realized that it was not safe to be lost in the place. The wind had picked up and the temperature was dropping. After selecting the tab and choosing to turn around to the road, you can pick up the bus. If you ask directly, if you respect the correct one, then you will quickly lose your orientation. The compass showed the daylight, but the snow had fallen in all directions, and the familiar outlines of the trees appeared in a white shroud. I'll just go straight, I'll get out to civilization early and late, he thought, trying not to panic. The gods passed, and the forest became less dense. The phone remained stuck in the cold, and Jack lost himself in nature. Until the evening, we will understand that we got lost. The hedgehog was on the verge of completion, and the fur coat worked harder through the freezing gas. Jack dug a hole in the snow, covered it with yalan needles and wrapped his sleeping bag in there, trying to conserve the heat. The night was long and cold, and the thought was spinning in my head, how could I underestimate the forest so much? Day 3. In the morning, the hurtovina withered, but the snow began to pile up, so that Jack fell knee-deep with skin crumbs. The hedgehog has run out, it has lost a little bit of peas, as it stretched out as soon as possible. Hunger bit the boat, but Jack knew that panic would ruin the camp. You hang out and collapse in the distance, following the sun as the ice makes its way through the gloom. Melting the snow onto the sleeping bag, drinking water, even if it tasted like metal from an old flask. On that very day the first day became unbearable. Making his way through the thicket, Jack came across an old misly hut. It was completely destroyed, and had fallen through, but in the middle there was a bunch of cans with a stitched attachment, peas and stewed meat. It's better than nothing, he thought, burning a lot right in the hut to drink it. The canned food turned out to be natural, although with a wonderful flavor, and gave him a little strength. Alas, the joy was in vain. When Jack tried to leave the hut to gather more firewood, he felt the crunch of bread nearby. The shadow of the day has passed away, it is great and heavy. Vavk. My heart sank. Turning quickly in the middle and barricading the doors with hammers, spending the night under tension, listening to the sound on your skin. Day 4. The next day Jack plans to leave the hut. The canned food gave energy, but there is no way out of mind, so getting lost in the place is not an option. That's right, as soon as we faced a new problem. Having walked a few hundred meters, he fell into a snow-covered hole, an old sheep shepherd, dug up by Miss Livesey. A sharp piece of wood came up at the bottom, tearing his trouser leg and leaving a deep stain on his nose. The blood flowed freely, but it was still hot. Jack got out, bandaged the wound with a piece of his shirt and realized that now the skin was more important. He collapsed completely, burying himself in a self-made fire from his neck. Having penetrated the cold to the wrists, and left the coat completely dry, the gas has run out. Jack gleaned the dry milk and tried for years to ignite a wealth of cheesecakes that he had drunk. When a faint flame caught fire, your hands started to burn, and the wound on your nose began to burn. That night I was unable to sleep, pain and fear did not allow me to relax. Thoughts were spinning around my head, why are you kidding me? Why am I just going to see someone in this forest? 5th day. Until the 5th day, Jack was on the boundary. There was no loss of life, there was still water in the snow, which was spit out in the valleys over a lot of water. My leg was hard to hear, and my fingers began to feel numb due to the cold. You realized that you had the strength to leave him, but decided to try the rest. From the drawstrings and laces of the backpack, you can see the great SOS sign in the snow, wondering if you want to mark it. Then I became rich, trying not to fall asleep, knowing that sleep in such a state could become permanent. The unsatisfied silence revealed a wondrous sound, a low rumble that seemed to be approaching. Jack raised his head and raised his small flyer to the sky. Robberies? Nadia said. He collected the burning nail and began to wave it, screaming with all his remaining strength. So, having made a bell, a few years later Jack felt another sound, the rumble of snowmobiles. These were the local law enforcement officers that Jack's friends called out. The Stinks combed the forest after they had not returned for a week and had not responded to calls. The ritual warriors knew this uniquely comfortable one, wrapped in a sleeping bag and filled with extinguishing foulness. He had mild frostbite on his fingers, the wound on his nose was inflamed, and he was still alive. At the doctor's office, Jack recovered from his experience for a long time. The doctor said that just another day or two and you might not survive. This forest didn't take me much, but I moved on, he said later to his friends, holding a cup of hot tea in his hands. Having returned to normal life, Jack stopped going on hikes, but became more careful. Having bought a satellite phone, learned to recognize pasta and now taking a supply of pasta for the day. That forest in Lapland has lost its memory as a place, having encountered the boundaries of power, and having crossed them. And the old house, the old pit and that SOS sign became part of the story, as it was revealed with pride, albeit with a slight strain in the voice.